15th chapter. Take care of this. Let's see if I can do this without logging myself off. Did it?
Yeah.
All right. We're in the 18th chapter, and just quick review. This is a recapitulation of the whole teaching done through the lens of the three gunas: tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas is the principle of illusion, delusion, darkness, stupid. Rajas, the principle of activity, where all our desires, our strivings, our ambitions are. Sattva, clarity, peace, stillness, wherein we have a clear understanding of reality. Was there a question online?
No.
All right. What verse are we on?
47.
47?
Yeah.
All right, go for it. We're almost done. There's only 56, 58, I think.
No, it is chapter 18, no?
Yeah.
I think there's more than 66 for sure.
Oh my gosh. I didn't count right. All right, going on.
Shreyan swadharmo viguna paradharmat swanushtitat swabhava niyatam karma kurvannapnoti kilvisham. Better is one's own duty, though destitute of merits, than the duty of another well performed. He who does the duty ordained by his own nature incurs no sin.
Yes. And this is an echo of an earlier verse where he says the duty of another is fraught with fear. So, again, we've been discussing the 4 varnas, the 4 castes. And again, this is a loaded topic. The word varna also means color, by the way. The word caste also means like hue, caste, color. It has that frankly racial connotation. And Gita thunders both in the 4th chapter and in this chapter. Even though Krishna identifies the 4-fold caste, he said it's because of guna and karma, not janma. Guna means the qualities of mind. Karma means the actions we end up doing. Janma means birth. So later, the caste system became corrupted. And it became a stratified social system wherein you were at the top of the pyramid socially because of birth. And you were at the bottom of the social pyramid because of birth. But Gita does not say that. Gita says, look to what the desires of your heart are and what your actions are. And again, Gita loosely, this is not, rigid, divides society into 4 basic categories based on what we do. The Brahmins are those who are the intellectuals, the scholars, the religious people who have as their role in the society the preservation of the culture, the preservation of the sacred scriptures, the preservation of the means of knowledge. So if you are drawn to the spiritual life, you are a Brahmin, no matter what caste you were born into, or if you're a Westerner. Kshatriyas, those are the warriors. They are drawn to the establishment of justice. This is what a warrior does. Frequently, you will be in the army, but you will have the heart's desire to fight against injustice, to establish right. We would call these activists today, too. These are people with the Kshatriya temperament. Vaishyas, those are those who, in the old-timey days, this was the agrarians. But Swamiji used to say it's those people who were involved with the means of production and distribution of goods and services. So the mercantile class of people, again, if you're drawn to it. And then the Shudras, this is the working class, the laborer class, those people who are drawn to the trades, prefer to work with their hands. One of the conversations we're having in this culture now, there are those who finish high school and they don't want to go to college. They would rather be an electrician. They would rather be a contractor. So there's no one of these castes is less necessary than another or better. Gita never says that. But if you find that you go against your own self-nature, then you're probably going to have a lot of problems in life. Now, if you decide, let's say that you want to be an accountant, and what you really love is science. But maybe parents tell you this is safe, or this is what women do. Women don't become scientists. All sorts of lies that we get in the culture. Whatever it is you decide to go into this profession, and you are alienated from it, it's always going to be an effort to get yourself to get up and go to work. And then what do? Oh God, I can't wait to have a vacation. Why would you want to vacate your life? The very word is weird. Think. So this is what Karl Marx said, which I thought was just fascinating. If you are alienated from your labor, what you do, because you're so unhappy at what you're doing, you will spend what resources you get trying to go unconscious. I can't wait till I get home and have a cocktail. Trying to satisfy animal desires. And you don't think, you don't inquire, you just want to zone out. And then what happens is people start to desire those kinds of alienated jobs. Now, India is rife with bureaucrats. It's in this country too. But you know how a government worker is like a broken rifle? It won't work and you can't fire it. You know? And many people think that's the ideal job. I can go get a job where I don't have to work and they can't fire me. And I can just play with my phone all day long. This is what we call alienated labor. Now, if you go be an accountant when you really should have been a physicist, guess what? The Lord who creates this marvelous organized cosmos places in your heart exactly where you're supposed to be and the environment for you to work. So if you're being an accountant, you're taking somebody else's job. There's somebody out there who loves accounting, and you're in their slot. Not only that, there's an empty physicist spot, which isn't being fulfilled. So if we are not true to our swadharma, our heart's deepest desires, that is one of the things that screws up the society. Now, another dastardly point which messes up a society is when people start to get involved in false production and consumption. I think you may be the only one who's old enough to remember this. Do you remember when pet rocks came out?
Yes.
None of you probably remember.
I remember that.
Yeah. I mean, talk about a totally useless item. A pet rock. Does nothing. But it was very well marketed. Such you had the epitome of false production and consumption. And it's all over our society.
Jim, a question on the career front.
Yes.
So I feel like for me, I've always found jobs which I enjoy greatly, and the work is very fulfilling and satisfying.
That's great.
Yeah, but I find that I get very stressed about it. So I'm enjoying, like when I'm relaxed, I actually really enjoy the work. But then I get very just frantic and anxious.
Well, that's another problem. That's not, so we've gone over our 5 elements of karma yoga.
So it doesn't mean I'm not doing the wrong.
No.
Okay.
It's attachment.
Okay.
So let's go over the 5 elements of karma yoga, which are gone in depth in chapters 3, 4, and 5. This is just recapitulation. First, act. You will not fight freedom, find freedom by withdrawing from the world. How should I act? According to my swadharma, according to your inherent latent proclivities, according to the passion that's given you. So, for example, back when I was teaching music, I could tell right away if someone had what it took to be a professional musician when I would be working with a student. Had not a whole lot to do with, I was a voice teacher, how great their voice was. Many people who had great voices, they're not going to make it. People with adequate instruments, they're going to make it. Guess what the difference was? The ones who love to practice. It'd be 7, 8 o'clock at night. I'd be walking through the music building And I'd hear kids in the practice room just practicing away. They didn't have to be there. They just loved it. They loved it. So there's enormous power in following that passion. Act, O Arjuna, according to your Swadharma. In the yajna spirit, you dedicate your activity to the infinite. Make everything sacred. You have a new employer. You're working for God. Fourth one, renouncing our attachment to the fruits of action. The person, the metaphor they use back to the whole yajna is prasad. So for non-Indians, prasad, when you do a ritual and there's food, or better yet, so if you go to an Indian home, a more observant Indian home, the mother cooks the food and she takes a thali, and what does she do the first thing?
Offers it to the altar.
Oh, takes it to the god, you put it there. Then you take the food and put it on the table. We get what's called the remnant of the sacrifice. In other words, we get God's leftovers. That's what we do. So always you serve the presiding principle of any field of human endeavor. The muse, the god, has many different names. And the paycheck and the advancement and the title, that's prasad. But if you focus on what am I getting out of it? What am I getting out of it? And you're not likely to be happy. Again, back when I was teaching voice, I would frequently have a conversation. Do you want to be a working professional musician, or do you want to be a celebrity? They are not the same thing. I cannot promise you that you'll be a celebrity. A lot of things go into that. But if being a singer is a means to being a celebrity, for God's sake, go be a Kardashian.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to make music, you want to serve that muse, so all we get is work. All we get is work. We never get a guarantee on being famous or rich or well-known or any of that stuff. Last one's the most subtle, a renunciation of the sense of agency. That I, the ego who says I'm doing the doing, that's an illusion. It's an illusion. Two ways to look at it. Guna and karma is doing the acting, the force of the past and the qualities of my mind, or God is doing it all through me. The one thing we want to understand is the vanity of I'm doing it. I'm so smart. I'm so powerful. That gets in the way. Is that useful, Sophia?
Yeah, it's very useful. I'm realizing that I think my intention has not been right. It's been more about it hasn't been about serving the greater world. It's been more about how do I get ahead? How do I build whatever? And so on.
And Swamiji used to thunder, serve the society. What kind of work do you do?
I'm a CFO. I help startups to raise money.
Yeah. But see, so your job is to serve the startups.
Yeah.
See. I worked for a while with a woman who was in Atherton, very successful. She sold real estate. She was really a good yogi. And it wasn't about how many properties could she sell a year or how much money she would make and stuff like that. Her focus was, okay, I have a client. What's my job? My job is to help them find the perfect home for them. She was a servant. Can you see the difference?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Jim,
So-
may I add something?
Please. Is that Shweta?
Yes, Hari Om. Jim.
Hari Om.
just I wanted to add what you said reminded me. I was recently traveling, and there was a driver who, picked us up and took us around. And he was quite chatty, and in conversation he said this thing. He said that God has given me the job to take everyone to their destination, and I found it so beautiful that he thought of it like that.
Yes, yes, good for him. A good yogi to have that attitude. But God is my employer. I work for the divine. I don't work for PG&E. And serve, serve, serve. Become a seva. Become a servant. Now, even in the West, my brother was a retired full bird colonel in the Marine Corps. And when he was going up through the ranks and things like that, yes, there was a lot of pressure. You join an evangelical Christian church. There were some very good things about that tradition. One of them is they taught them this concept of the servant leader. The colonel is not one who is there to scare people, intimidate people, to give orders, to control, stuff like that. No, he's there to serve the lowliest private. He's a servant leader. All sorts of these notions that are there for those who have eyes to see them. So anyway, I tell this story frequently. I have a dear friend, and he had this great love of the theater and music. He's good, but he had fear. He came from working class people. His parents owned a bar, and he went to school to become an accountant, finance person. Never got his CPA, but he did a lot of finance stuff. And he basically hated it. And he was always getting into fights, and he was always getting fired. Eventually, he just was a contractor. And he could do it. But he loved it when he got laid off, because then he could go be in a show. So you know what's wrong with this picture? Then he retires at 70, moved out to Rossmore, doing music and theater. Unfortunately, at that age, it's not so easy to memorize a script anymore. And he's an okay actor. He's not a brilliant actor. But I always think of what might has his life have been like if at the age of 20 he had followed his passion rather than taking the safe. Now, the older we get, the harder it is to move away from adharmic work activity. Many of us at the age of 50 with families can't afford to go back to school and have entry level in a profession. Some of us can. So if you cannot do what you love, then we work at loving what we do. And there are techniques for that. So we have to work to at least get to the place of sama vishta, equality of vision. Now, when I give these talks, many people misunderstand and they think, oh, if I only were aligned with my swadharma, then everything would be okay in my life. No, that's just one particular factor. And if you're deeply alienated from work, it's going to be really hard to do yoga. So here, the modern Indian understanding of this is don't try to be above your station. Nonsense. Doesn't mean that. It means follow your bliss. Live authentically. Doesn't mean it's going to be an easy job. Another modern example of what Krishna's talking about is when gays and lesbians and transgender people come out of the closet. So if you try to live a heteronormative life and it's inauthentic, you're going to hurt people, first of all, that you get involved with. And there's always a lie going on. Now, I'm not saying that coming out of the closet isn't really hard. And there's a lot of prejudice. And you have to deal with a whole nother level of what society says. But there's a kind of peace and authenticity that comes with it. This is living true to your Swadharma. All right, next verse.
Sahajam karma kaunteya sadoshamapi na tyajet sarvarambha hi doshena dhumena nagniravavritaha. One should not abandon, O Kaunteya, the duty to which one is born, though faulty, for we are not all undertakings enveloped by evil, as fire by smoke.
So, whatever it is, and it doesn't mean what caste you're born into, it means whatever it is that you're called to do. So again, let me talk about my own direct experience. So the two great loves of my life, number one, God, number two, music. Well, unfortunately, as much as I love God and have devoted my life to it, I'm a crappy yogi. I've made all the mistakes. You know? But this is what I'm called to do. Why do I live this spiritual life? I need it more than others, perhaps. But this is what I'm called to do. In my music career, it became very clear at some point that I'm never going to sing like Luciano Pavarotti. It isn't going to happen. The Lord didn't give me a Stradivarius instrument, he gave me a Suzuki instrument. You know, that's it. So I was a good working journeyman. I was a good musician. I worked hard. I was never a great musician. And that's okay. That's okay. But if you live true to your dreams, true to your passion, it will not be an effort to do this work. You will love it. And you have the greatest chance of success. But again, that's karma. That's part of the karma that's been given you. in the Chinmaya mission. Many of you know this story. In 1993, Swamiji said, I think it's time for you to take sannyas, to become a Swami.
Okay. Jim, what is sannyas?
Sannyas means to take renunciation, to become a sannyasi or a Swami.
Like vows or something?
Yes.
Okay.
Run around in an orange robe and have a 5-syllable unpronounceable name.
So you become a monk?
Yep.
Okay.
And Swamiji had never asked me to do anything that really, really didn't make me very happy. So I said, yes. So he said, go back to San Francisco, get rid of your possessions, give your excess cash to the mission, and meet me in Bangalore on Shivaratri the following year, and we will do the ceremony then. So I go back to San Francisco. And then Swamiji leaves California. He goes to Virginia, and he's there for 2 weeks for a camp. Then he goes to San Diego, and 1 week into the camp in San Diego, he dies. And his successor was not comfortable in giving me sannyas. He said, that was between you and Swamiji. Besides, the Indians won't accept you, and to the white people, it will make no difference. All right.
How did you feel about that?
Wasn't my sankalpa. It's all in God's hands. This is just a renunciation of attachment to the fruits. If I had wanted to be a Swami, it would be different. His sankalpa is something he said he thought I would get value from. But you never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen in life. And I can give you all sorts of stories from all sorts of friends. My friend Rebecca and her husband really, really wanted children. They wanted them so badly. I think they knew what to do to make babies, but it wasn't working. So they decided to adopt. And they tried 2 adoptions. And both times the birth mother changed her mind at the last minute and wanted to keep the baby. And this is when I had my last church job. She came back and she was just devastated. But she was a good Christian and a good yogi in that sense. So she gave it over to God. I guess this isn't God's plan. Within weeks, she was pregnant. Who's to say? And at the last time I talked with her, which was many years ago, she had at least 2, maybe 3 kids by that point. Super mom. She's a good mom. But the point is, you never know what life has in store for us. So our peace comes from acceptance, surrender, not trying to bludgeon life with self-will. We don't work hard. So, do your own life. You can't do someone else, they're taken. Even if in the world's eyes, you aren't necessarily the best. And this is also for many of us an attempt to, or an understanding of real humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Let me say that again. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's getting rid of that paranoid observer. How am I doing? Am I okay? What do they think of me? So we begin to start to operate at the human level on the most difficult position of ego, which is to be a fellow among fellows, a worker among workers. Ego says, I'm a little bit better, smarter, fancier than other people, or I'm just the worst, I'm just terrible. Or most of us have, I'm the piece of poop that the world revolves around. I'm an egomaniac with low self-esteem. That's where most of us, many of us end up. But just do our duty. Do what's in front of us. Serve right where we are with the skills and the talents and the opportunities that are right in front of us. I was talking over the weekend with this kid. He's 31. He's back in a master's program at Dartmouth, full ride, fellowship and living stipend in multimedia and music, and it's right up his alley. Oh, nervous and upset and anxious. What am I going to do after I graduate? I've got to start developing contacts. I've got to... Dude, it's your first semester of graduate school. But can you see all that living in the future? Gita says, trust the process of life. It's all going to work out. The end is the means in a different form. Pay attention to now. Carlos Castaneda's, what did he say? Be an impeccable warrior. Meaning, do what's right in front of us.
Impeccable lawyer?
Warrior.
What's a warrior?
Someone who fights.
Oh, warrior.
Warrior.
Okay. That makes more sense.
So what he basically means is, live a life with integrity and putting our heart and soul into what's right in front of us. No attachment to the outcome, just because it's the right thing to do. And here Gita says, if you do this, you will not incur sin and you will not have fear in your life. Now, papam, sin. We have punya, merit, papam, sin. We do not want to superimpose a Western or Judeo-Christian notion of sin. What's come to be the idea in the West is God is somewhere between Santa Claus and a traffic cop. Give me what I want, Santa, I mean God. Or, I just did something that's, not ritually pure, I ate a hamburger, oh God, and I'm going to get punished, fined for my traffic violation. We want to get rid of that idea. Let me redefine punya and papam. Are these words that you're familiar with, Mike? No, okay.
I mean, sin. Yes.
Sin and merit is how they're usually translated. Punya is merit, papam is translated as sin. Any action, gross or subtle, so you can have thoughts, that serve to bring greater serenity, greater quiescence to the mind, is punya. Any action, gross or subtle, that has as a result more agitation, more disquiet, is papam. So that's a much easier way to look at it. You don't have to go to a list of this is good, this is bad, etc. So, for example, if you have a conflict with a friend and you say something cruel, how does it make you feel? Huh?
Sad.
Yeah, pop them. Not because it's in a rule book. It messed with your serenity. Antithetically, you go to work and you have these projects to be done, and you work very hard and you're very conscientious, and it comes out good, and your team's is pleased with the outcome. You go home, yeah, that was a good job. It's punya.
But what if the disquiet is caused by the attachment, not by the thing itself?
Then your problem is attachment, not the action.
Okay.
You've hit on a very good point. It's what I call sour grapes or phony renunciation. Sometimes, because we have attachment, when we engage in an activity, it becomes very painful. And phony renunciation is I give up the activity. And that's how people end up with little lives. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Real renunciation is get your ass out there in the battle of life. The Kurukshetra. This is the overarching battle that Arjuna is going to fight. And practice renunciation, letting go of the outcome, letting go of ego. Remember what Arjuna does in the first chapter, beginning of the second chapter. Looks at these armies, he's afraid of losing, he's identified and attached. Those are my cousins over there, that's Drona, my archery teacher, there's Bhima, my grandfather. I don't want to do this. It's too painful. I'll be spiritual. I'm going to go into the forest and meditate. He literally says that. And how does Krishna respond? Do you remember? He says, don't be a wimp. Uses the word klaimya. Don't be a wuss. Get up and fight. And he starts whining. He comes up with excuses and rationalizations. I can't fight this war because if I do, the ancestors won't get their rapinda, the rice balls. That's literally what he comes up with at the end. Now, wait a minute. I thought the problem was that Duryodhana and the ilk were not responsible people, and then that the country wasn't in good hands, and that your family, the Pandavas, are there to establish righteousness. Look at the larger picture. He loses sight of it altogether. Phony renunciation. So it's nice to know your doubt is at least 3,000 years old. All right, next verse.
I have a question about punya and pap.
Yes.
So this is related to being in relationships of some, either friendship or romantic.
Mm-hmm.
If you are in a relationship that causes you agitation of your mind for various reasons, say the relationship is toxic, but you're attached because you're still getting something from it, then is it pap to stay in the relationship?
That's a subtle thing, and we can talk about it offline. But basically, if you've got a particular klesha, an affliction, what will happen is you'll be unconsciously sending out a particular kind of energy into the world. And God's very efficient. So what she'll do is bring the perfect person that matches that klesha with the klesha. Klesha means affliction of their own. But very efficient. So if you think, oh, this is toxic, I'm going to get rid of that guy. Let me get a new one. Well, if you're still putting out that particular stuff, that energy, guess what you're going to keep drawing? Is that
So-
making sense?
Yeah.
So are you talking about a relationship you're in currently?
No.
But let's do hypothetical. What, you know me, guess what I'm going to ask? Is this the first guy you dated that's been like this? And for most, no, Jim. Second one, no, Jim. Third, no, Jim. Well, guess who's putting out unconsciously that energy? So getting rid of the person or not getting rid of the person, I would say that'll all work itself out. What you and I need to do is our own healing.
Makes sense.
So for example, let's say you're codependent and you take hostages. No, many of us do. I don't think I'm lovable, so I'll become whatever they want. And then I'll grab onto them and I'll do anything to keep them from going away. And then after a while, I'm so tired of being unauthentic, I'm just going to explode into rage and stuff. You know, all sorts of syndromes. So what do? You start living authentically. You start being truly Deepa. You start telling the truth. You start being the most authentic you could be. Now, if that person isn't the right person for you, they're going to hightail it out of there. I promise you. You're too healthy. I can't stand this.
So then in this case, the path would be to continue persisting that klesha within ourselves and not doing the yoga that is to heal ourselves, right?
Well, I mean, the problem is that you stay in dysfunctional patterns of
exactly,
thinking and feeling and acting, most of which we've learned as children as defense mechanisms or from other lifetimes. Doesn't matter where they came from. The point is we're grown-ups and they don't work. And you go to the therapist and you'll know why you have these particular kleshas. But the yogi then says, but I've got to change. I've got to think, feel, and act in a different way. That's tapas. That's the hard part.
That makes sense.
Same thing with the job. Oh, I can't stand my job. I like the work, but I have this horrible boss and I can't get along with him. Oh, you have trouble with this boss. I'm so sorry. Have you had trouble with bosses before? Every single one I've ever had. Why do I keep going into companies where all the bosses are assholes? Well, guess who probably has the problem? So that's the work. It's not quit the job, can't stand my neighbor, get a different house, wrong boyfriend, girlfriend, husband or wife. I was talking with a friend today about the monastic life in the West. He says, I don't know whether I'm cut out for monasticism. I said, well, you know what it's like. It's like an arranged marriage with 20 people you've never met before. You walk into the community, think it's hard living with one person, try doing it with 20.
Who said this? Swamiji.
No, I did. All right, next verse. Very good questions.
Asakta buddhi sarvatra jitatma vigata spriha naishkarmya siddhim paramam samnyasenadhigacchati. He whose intellect is unattached everywhere, who has subdued his self, from whom desire has fled. He, through renunciation, attains the supreme state of freedom from action.
So now he's riffing on kind of moving from this karma yoga discussion into the highest knowledge. So in the second chapter of Gita, we have this Sthita Prajna Purusha section, the marks of the person of steady wisdom. But how do you get there? How do you get there? Now, in second chapter, verse 54, Arjuna says, what are the marks of the person of steady wisdom? How do they walk? How do they sit? How do they talk? Now, whenever we have a series in the scripture, not always, but usually, the most important ideas put forward first. So verse 55 in the second chapter is one of my favorites. When a person casts off all the desires of the mind, O Partha, and is satisfied in the self by the self, then they are said to be a person of steady wisdom. That's the best definition of yoga I know. And in this verse, we get some hints as to, okay, how do we get there? What is it that we need to work on? So let's break it down. So what's the first idea?
He whose intellect is unattached everywhere.
Yes. So those of us who've studied Shankara, we know one of his most famous images is the snake and the rope. Is this one you've heard, Mike? Okay. So what happens is the person is in a state of illusion and delusion. They look down and what's really there is a rope and they think there's a snake. So they're frightened. So what do we have to do? We have to inquire. Got to be able to quiet the mind enough to really look. Oh, I investigate. It's not a snake, it's a rope. Now, if I have this strange habit of smooching the snake, I'm never gonna see the rope. Swami Tejamayananda used to tell this story of the Swami who goes to a family's home for a bhiksha. You know, in the old timey days, bhiksha, bhiksha, you brought your begging bowl. Nowadays, they invite the Swami for dinner. And at the end of the dinner, they give him a thali with a bunch of fruit on it. And there's an envelope with the check in it. Puts it in his pocket and then prasad, gives it to the family. And then the householder, the father of the family, says, oh, Swamiji, you've done a great thing. You have taken sannyas and given up all worldly desires. And the Swami gets down on his knees and touches the feet of the householder. He's appalled. He goes, no, 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 Swami, it pulls him up. And the Swami says, no, you are the greater renunciate. I've given up the world, but you've given up infinite bliss. So, in an earlier chapter, I can't remember which one, I'm sorry, Krishna says, the person who gets rid of the objects of desire, but allows the desire to remain behind, is verily a hypocrite. Doesn't work. Then he goes on to say, but their desire leaves them upon seeing the Supreme. So the price tag for steady wisdom, for self-realization, first and foremost, is we have to give up our attachment to the world. How? Through insight, through discrimination. And of course, the greatest example that comes to my mind is the whole idea you find in the 12-step programs. So someone is addicted to alcohol, shall we say. In AA, they say the only requirement for AA membership is the desire to stop drinking, meaning the desire to be free from the desire to drink. You've accomplished it. Nobody gets into AA on a good day. Believe me. It's a crappy day. Everyone comes in. You've been sick and tired of being sick and tired. And the consequences of drinking cause more pain than what pleasure drinking is. So also with the world. We have to pay attention, pay attention, pay attention. What is it that causes my suffering? Where is happiness really? We've talked about this many, many times. Until finally we begin to get in our thick skulls. The cause of my suffering is the craving, kama. It's the wanting, vancha. It's the longing, the spurha. It's the thirsting, Krishna. It isn't because I don't have what I want. It's because I'm stuck wanting. Then I can begin to develop the desire to be free from desire. Is that a desire, Jim? Yes, it is. But that's called sunage, auspicious desire. It is a desire that will remove desires. Yeah, you give that one up. So it's not something we achieve overnight. The Vivekachudamani, Shankara defines vairagya, detachment, is that desire to give up attachment to all enjoyments gained through the sense objects. We don't achieve it overnight. Beginning is issue by issue. You let go, you let go. Finally, when the mind is thin enough, tanu manasa, we can go, oh, I'm just gonna give up that whole lump of the small self. No, it's stupid. Next idea.
who has subdued his self.
And here we mean the small self. How do you subdue it? To see it for what it is. To clearly see that the paradigm, getting what I want, is what's going to make me happy. That's what's wrong with my life. That's a lie to see that. To see that no individual sense of self is substantial or real. So any effort to protect it is doomed to failure. Oh, I was walking down the sidewalk today in the sun, and my shadow fell into a dirty part of the sidewalk. So I had to get a broom to clean my shadow. How successful are you going to be at cleaning your shadow with a broom? So ego strategy, am I okay? How can I be secure? How can I be successful? What me, what I is it that's trying to do all those things? What the yogi finds is it's chit chaya. It's a shadow self. It's a phony self. Or to use the contemporary term, fake news. It's not real. Just pretends to be real. So we subdue the self initially, first of all, through insight. Some of you have taken Vipassana meditations.
Mhm.
What does Vipassana mean?
Dispassionate observation.
Well, literally, that's Pali. The Sanskrit would be Vipassana. Drish Pashyati. What root is that? To see. Vipassana means insight, profound vision, not just the vision you have with your eyes. It's a superlative. A lot of people call it insight meditation. That's a pretty good translation. But really seeing what's going on is Vipassana. That's what it means. So, this desire to give up attachments to the world is not done out of some moralistic viewpoint. Nobody with willpower is strong enough to give up the world. But it can be done with deep insight, deep understanding. But it is what needs to be accomplished. Next idea.
From whom desire has fled.
I love the way it's framed in language. It doesn't mean who's beaten up all their desires with a baseball bat.
Mhm.
From whom desire has fled. So I always use this example in the beginning class. When you were a kid, you had a tricycle, and you got a little older and you got a bicycle. What happened to your desire and love for the tricycle? Gone. This is mature. Vairagya. This is mature. Tyagaha. Abandonment. This is mature. Sannyas. Listen carefully. In the end, we are healed not so much by what we turn from, but by what we turn to. Turn your mind to the infinite, and in time the world will lead. Next idea.
Through renunciation.
Yes. And what's the word he's using? Tyagena? What's the word in Sanskrit? I forgot.
Samya sena
Samyasena, by means of renunciation. Yes. So the desires leave us by this mature abandonment of the world. Why? Because we've headed for the real stuff above. Next idea.
attains the supreme state of freedom from action.
Yes. So the way we're free from the afflictions and the reactions that come from our actions. Oh, I screwed up. Oh, I did so well. And all that business. When I stand back and know I'm always the untouched, uninvolved witness of the actions. Got the bay window there. The drapes are open. You stand in the bay window. You just watch the traffic go by. It can be a noisy motorcycle. It can be a big truck. It can be a fire engine. It can be limousine. None of it touches me. I'm just looking at it. So also for the yogi. She becomes deeply rooted in Sakshi Bhav, the attitude of the witness. Is that all the pieces of that one?
Yeah.
All right. Need to stop and say it down. What number are we on for next week?
50.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Thank you all.